This is our continuing coverage of the latest coming in on the Ukraine-Russia tensions. Let's now get you up to speed with the latest on the ground. The tensions have been escalating in Ukraine as the country remains on the brink of war. According to the United States, war is just hours away. The Pentagon, in fact, has said that Russia could attack today. Meanwhile, Russia says Ukrainian combat vehicles crossed the border. 5 members of a Ukrainian sabotage group were allegedly killed after they entered Russian territory. Ukraine has hit back at those claims, saying that its forces are not in Russian territory. It has also accused Moscow of peddling false news about shelling a border post. Currently, there have been over 1,500 ceasefire violations in eastern Ukraine. In his latest Security Council meeting, the Russian president even said that Russia is considering requests to recognize the Ukraine separatists. Meanwhile, the European Union is saying Russia will be cut off from markets if it invades Ukraine. The US has also warned the United Nations that Russia has a list of Ukrainians to be killed or sent to prison camps. Meanwhile, Western powers are stepping up diplomatic efforts to try and ease those mounting tensions in eastern Ukraine. In the latest, France pushed the idea of a meeting between the leaders of the US and Russia. While that proposal was cautiously welcomed by Ukraine, the Kremlin was quick to pour cold water on the summit plans. The Kremlin says it is premature to talk about any specific plans for organizing any kind of summits. Just a short while back, the Russian president chaired a Security Council meeting. Putin said that Russia has done all it could to use peaceful tools, but Kiev has no intentions to resolve the crisis. Not just that, Putin also warned NATO allies once again, saying that the threat would increase tenfold if Ukraine joins the NATO. US President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin had earlier accepted in principle to hold a summit to discuss security and strategic stability in Europe. France says there is still diplomatic hope to resolve the Ukrainian crisis. The summit was agreed upon by the Russian and American sides after rounds of telephonic diplomacy by the French President. Emmanuel Macron dialed Vladimir Putin twice on Sunday. The first call lasted 105 minutes. The two leaders agreed to work towards a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine and also intensify diplomatic efforts. The second call lasted for an hour, and the announcement of the summit came shortly after. Following talks with Putin and Zelensky, Macron then parleyed with his American counterpart Joe Biden. They discussed the ongoing diplomatic efforts and deterrence attempts. United States agreed to attend the Ukraine summit called by France, but at the same time, it downplayed hopes regarding any breakthrough. The White House, in a statement, said that Joe Biden had accepted the meeting in principle on the condition that Russia does not invade Ukraine.
Put in place. We have a lot to discuss. For all the questions here, I want to make.
For more on these developments, joining us on the broadcast is Dr. Lada El-Rosdiki, who is the founder of the Black Trident Defense and Security Consulting Group in Kiev. Thanks very much for being here with us. The Russian president just a short while back chaired a key Security Council meeting amid those rising tensions. He has said that threats would increase tenfold if Ukraine joins the NATO. Would you like to react to that?
Yes, I think that NATO is not really something that Ukraine is aspiring to become a member of in any time soon. And the NATO narrative is just another falsity being used by Putin to promote war and eventually take over Ukraine. So it's not a valid argument or statement whatsoever.
Right. Even as the East Ukraine rebel republics ask the Russian president to recognize their independence, the Pentagon is saying that the attack on Ukraine could happen today, but that there is still time for diplomacy. Do you share that optimism?
I'm hoping that there's still a time for optimism, and we have to understand that the Kremlin has created the so-called puppet regimes of the DNR and LNR. So it's a little bit ironic that that Putin is asking Ukraine to recognize them or the broader international community. As far as the attacks are concerned, it's very important that people all over the world realize that the war is already happening in Ukraine. For the last 2 months, tensions are incredibly high. We have faced 2 major cyber attacks that shut down ministries and services. We are very concerned about the coming days because Ukraine is scheduled, unfortunately, bad timing, to remove itself from the electricity transmission system that is connected to Russia and Belarus. And for a few days, Ukraine has to be alone and independent using its own electricity. So all of the nuclear plants are on working, all 15 of them, 15 plus one in Kharkiv. And this is a very, very difficult area to be living in, particularly because the communication system, internet, Wi-Fi, all depends on electricity. And so, yes, we're all expecting something really to happen in the coming days.
Right. A claim put out by the Russian military says that Ukrainian combat vehicles crossed the border with Russia and that they have been eliminated. It says that 5 members of Ukrainian sabotage group were killed during the clashes. How is Kiev viewing this claim?
Well, we've become quite cynical to these types of claims because they're false claims. What is on the Ukrainian territory is the Russian armed forces, and the Russian weaponry is already in Ukraine, and they've been there for 8 years. We are completely surrounded. And when we are listening to the Kremlin, we should always look into it like a reverse mirror. What the Kremlin claims is what the Kremlin is actually doing.
Right. So what is the assessment in Kiev then at this point regarding Russia's strategy?
Russia's strategy at this point is to, it's actually kind of interesting because everybody is tense. Very few people believe that it will be a full-on attack with rockets flying into Kiev. The continuous attacks from different areas of Ukraine are something that are just going to be intensifying. And Ukraine really needs to work together with its allies because currently it's become a subject of international and geopolitics rather than an object and a participant. If we look at the Minsk agreements, which everybody has been hearing about, these are agreements that carry less juridical value than the Budapest Memorandum. And I think that the diplomats that are really working hopefully hard to prevent war, an intense war in Ukraine and in Europe, they should be focusing on creating a new negotiation where the Budapest Memorandum is used as a foundation. The Budapest Memorandum was signed to guarantee and assure Ukraine's sovereignty because Ukraine gave up one of the world's largest nuclear arsenals. And they need to play this game right, or else a lot of people are going to die. And nuclear weapons have been removed from Ukraine. However, there are numerous areas in Ukraine, particularly in the non-controlled territories, that pose massive radioactive threats to the international community, reaching as far as France, including chemicals such as mercury and chlorine. There are a few others, and they're right in that battle line. So I think we could use nature as a key to the solution and prevent major, potentially global disaster by getting international observers from the International Atomic Energy Agency and other agencies focused on environmental security to just secure those areas before things become even worse.
Right. After Emmanuel Macron talked about the possibility of a summit between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin says it's too premature to hold a summit. Are you surprised at all by this statement coming in from Russia?
I'm not surprised at all. What I am surprised by is that the Ukrainian partners and allies have allowed this situation to become as tense as it is. And I don't really know what type of attack they're waiting for in order to impose the first set of sanctions against the Kremlin and against specific individuals and corporations of the Russian Federation. They should move.
Right. Earlier, the Western assessment was that the attack or the invasion would take place on the 16th of February. Now the assessment says, the report saying that the attack could take place today itself. If you can talk about the mood on the ground and what these predictions or these assessments really mean for the people living in Ukraine.
It means anxiety, very high levels of anxiety. People are becoming even more vulnerable to illness. Their immune systems are down. Economically, businesses are doing worse than they were doing with the first initial lockdowns of COVID pandemic. People are tense. And I'm very pleased to say that nobody is going out of their minds, and we still have toilet paper in the grocery stores. But how long that will last really depends on how quickly we will have some sunshine coming through with good news and promises. Unfortunately, I repeat myself, that combination of cyber and energy attacks combined with the military activities, it's a very ugly potpourri that smells forebodingly of death.
There have been a series of diplomatic efforts. How have you viewed the claims and the counterclaims of the tensions on the brink of de-escalation, and now once again we are talking about Ukraine being on the brink of war?
Right. It's very tense, and the first victim in war is truth. And truth has now been completely deconstructed. And it's time for leaders. I'm really waiting to see leaders from the global community come out. It is time for public-private partnership. State actors have kind of discredited themselves, and maybe it's time, like Richard Branson has come out numerous times. He's a big supporter of Ukraine's sovereignty, and perhaps it's time for corporations also to stand united and work together with the diplomatic corps to prevent war in Ukraine and return the stability that Ukraine so desperately deserves.
Indeed, we are leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here on WION World is One.
Thank you for covering this very important issue.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.